Hi, Greg Alderman. Welcome to One Voice Board. This is volume 4 of my board behavior proverbs, and I'm going to get right into it with number 17. The board's job is to make decisions in a world of uncertainty. I remember sitting at a seminar one time listening to somebody talk about the inability of leadership teams to make decisions because they were afraid of making the wrong decision. And the fear of making the wrong decision caused them to not make any decisions. Hey, we are going to potentially get some things wrong. We are going to potentially be a little bit off base, but that's the nature of making decisions and having goals. We can always go back when we have our information loop and our feedback loop working properly and make adjustments to our goals. They're not set in stone. They are things that can be erased and rewritten with each meeting of the board. We can adjust the goals as they need to be made. But there are times like our church when we lived through COVID, can any of you relate? Where we had to make decisions. We had to make decisions about when and how we were going to meet. We had to make decisions about masks. We had to make decisions about things that affected the livelihood of the staff. I bet I'm not alone in having to make real-time, quick decisions. And we were making decisions with limited information, but somebody in the church, and it was the board, needed to make those decisions. And if they didn't make those decisions, nobody was going to be able to. You know, a lot of times boards will also fall into not wanting to make a decision because they don't want conflict to result from that decision. But really, you have to remember, not making a decision is a decision. So there is going to be uncertainty, and we have to make decisions in a world of uncertainty, and that is the board's responsibility. I love that proverb. Here's Proverb 18. Just because something comes before the board doesn't mean it needs to deal with it. I'm not going to comment a lot on this. I've had board members, and maybe you can relate to this, who believe that just because somebody said something out in the congregation and they passed it back to the board, that meant that then the board had to discuss it. Not true. The board's job is not to be go-betweens. They're meant to be representatives of the owner. And if that feedback is appropriate to goal development, if that feedback is appropriate towards accountability and work performance, then yes, it's relevant. But if it's just some off-the-wall thing that really is a distraction to the work of the board, it doesn't need to be dealt with. It can be received. I love when I was in the Navy, and something came along that basically a commanding officer or somebody in charge didn't want to take too seriously. They would just say "duly noted," and then they would move on with whatever else. Maybe you could use that phrase in your board. Here's Proverb number 19. Control what you must rather than what you can. Now, this is another big bulls, small bulls idea, and it has to do with limitations. Just because you can exercise a limitation doesn't mean you should. There are times where we need to give more freedom and not be too restrictive with our staff. Give them creativity to discover new means to do ministry, new means to do Bible study, new means to do group development. Those are the kind of things that we want to encourage in our organization. We don't want to stifle creativity by making our limitations too strict, right? So I love that idea. Control what you can, what you have to, and not just anything that you can. And boards fall into that trap when they're managing staff behavior. They want to control every means, every decision about what's done rather than setting the principles and setting the goals. Proverb number 20, if the board speaks, then it's golden. But if an individual member speaks, then it's just advice. I've talked about this one a lot. It's always worth repeating. I like the idea of thinking about when the board speaks, it speaks with one voice. And when it speaks with one voice, that's gold. That's precious. That's valuable. Those are the things that we need to pay attention to. When an individual speaks, it's just advice. It's just an offer of an idea. And finally, my 21st board behavior proverb. If the board cannot practice the gospel amongst its members, then it cannot hope to lead the church at all. If the board can't practice the gospel, it's not going to lead the gospel. What do I mean by this? There will be times you hurt each other's feelings. There will be times where you cross swords. There will be times when people overstep. They need to admit they're wrong, but they also need to be forgiven. We need to practice what it looks like to make amends, to say we're sorry and put things back together. And trust me when I tell you, if the board's not doing that, they can't lead the church to do it. I believe it actually creates a stifling block to the work of the Holy Spirit within the organization if the board's not living out the gospel towards its own members. So I leave that as the final board behavior proverb for you. I hope it's been a blessing to you. If that topic or any of the other topics I've mentioned are something you want to dive into a little bit more, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at greg@onevoiceboard.org. And I'm praying for you and the health of your board, that it practices the gospel with one another.